guys, welcome back to my channel. On today's video we're going to talk about the Bell Witch haunting finally, and I'm super excited to go over everything. So we have our top 10 terrifying facts about the Bell Witch, so let's jump right into it. Now, the haunting started seemingly kind of out of nowhere when John Bell was walking on his 300+ acre farm, checking the fields, and he came across a really strange creature, which was a mix between a rabbit and a dog. And it had a dog's body and a rabbit's head. Now, it also had glowing eyes, and obviously he was frightened, so he fired several shots trying to scare it away, and then it finally just took off. And that night, he and his family started to hear scraping and knocking on the outside of their log home. Each time that he and his sons would go outside to try to determine the culprit, they could never find somebody out there. There were no trees immediately around it. They could never find a cause. Now, this continued for weeks, months, and eventually even years. And in addition to the knocking sounds, the children also reported hearing gnawing sounds on their bedposts, and eventually the activity got so violent that it was pulling the bed sheets and the pillows off of the bed, very similar to a scene from the movie An American Haunting. So fact number 2, John Bell and his family were tormented by this witch or being, whatever it was, for literal years. They heard voices that got increasingly louder. It started first as whispers, but eventually it became a fully vocal voice of an old woman, and it would even sing hymns and speak in different languages. It would often mock others in their own voice, and it would even come to them with gossip from the town, things that it shouldn't have known that it did. Eventually the voice became intelligent, and it also would communicate with them and answer questions. Eventually it even communicated with a soon-to-be president, Andrew Jackson. Which leads us to fact number 3. When Andrew Jackson was a general, he actually had served with John Bell Jr., and he heard about the haunting that the family was dealing with, so he decided that he wanted to go visit. And as his men and their caravan were making their way up the road towards the property, they came to a sudden halt. The horses would no longer move, almost like they couldn't pull the wagons. Eventually, after a few minutes of trying, the men were met with a voice that was taunting them, and they were able to bargain with the voice, seemingly of the Bell Witch, to allow them onto the property, and then and only then were they able to move the carriages forward. Now, when Andrew Johnson's party made it to the Bell House that evening, strange things began to happen, and one of the alleged witch hunters in the party was actually severely attacked. He was beaten and actually thrown out of the house by the spirit. Now, after throwing the first witch hunter out, the Bell Witch promised to find the next fraud, which meant that Andrew Jackson's party, all of the men were terrified and they were begging to leave. Fact number 4, the Bell family was not actually the only family tormented by the Bell Witch. In an effort to support or hopefully disprove the Bell Witch haunting, one of the Bell family's friends, James Johnston, actually stayed the night in the Bell home, trying to see if anything would happen to him. Now, the night that he stayed in the home, he was attacked just the same way that the Bell children had been. He had bed linens torn off of him, pillows torn off of the bed and onto the floor, and he was slapped over and over. The fact that James Johnston experienced the same thing as the family is somewhat compelling, especially because it proved that it wasn't the Bell family just seeking attention or fame. Now, Johnston continued to be a strong supporter of the Bell family, and he also was a strong advocate towards the truthfulness of their story. In fact, when he spoke about it, he said that it was a spirit, just like in the Bible. Fact number 5, the Bell family and those closely tied to the haunting always referred to the haunting as a witch, and even eventually named it Kate, thinking that perhaps a disgruntled neighbor named Kate Batts had set the witch upon them. But in my opinion, it's more likely that they were dealing with a spirit or even a demon. On one of James Johnston's many visits to the Bell home, the spirit actually spoke to him and said, "I am a spirit. I was once very happy but have been disturbed." With that in mind, perhaps the spirit wasn't a witch, and it was something that the Bell family had accidentally stirred up in their construction of the Bell family home in the outbuildings. But who or what was that spirit? So fact number 6, several visitors would come to the Bell family property, and the spirit once told an interested group of visitors that it was tied to an old Native American burial mound that was disturbed when construction started on the Bell plantation. It was also able to determine things about other visitors that it shouldn't have known. Once, a skeptical Englishman visited the home, and the spirit mocked him in the voice of his parents. Now, that night, he was awoken several times with the spirit taunting him in both his mother and his father's voice. And he quickly left to go back to England. When he got there, he found out actually that his parents had been tormented by the spirit speaking to them in his voice. And so he actually wrote a letter back to the Bell family apologizing for his skepticism. Fact 7, the visitors to the home would often have the family dog set after them. And it was said that the spirit, in addition to being able to control animals, could also take the form of animals such as rabbits, dogs, bears, wolves. Perhaps then what John Bell first encountered when the haunting started wasn't just some strange creature, but was the Bell Witch itself in another form. Fact number 8, Bell Witch spirit was often said to be able to speak many different languages at a whim. When it was asked to speak in German, it did so by mocking the visitor and speaking in his German grandmother's voice. At times when it would be angry, it would rotate between different languages and almost speaking in what sounded like tongues, but it was actually different human languages across history. This, along with some of its other behavior, is very in line with the Jinn folklore, especially the fact that it could know things about people and speak different languages. So it begs the question of what was it that was really with the Bell family after all of those years. Now, the Bell family was also a family that owned slaves, and so there is some speculation that perhaps there was voodoo magic at play, and that the Bell Witch actually still haunts the Bell lineage to this day, punishing them for having owned slaves. Fact number 9. The spirit told the family that it intended to kill John Bell. It tormented him and cursed at him relentlessly. Now, the Bell Witch actually targeted Betsy Bell the most, but that's the story that's most well known. What's not as talked about is how it also targeted John Bell Sr. and actually claimed to take his life. Eventually, in 1820, he died from poisoning. The spirit actually took immediate credit for this and even sang drinking songs at his funeral. However, some have speculated that a slave poisoned him, or that John Bell Jr. had also poisoned his father. It was even speculated that John Bell Jr. could use ventriloquism to throw his voice, but if that were the case, how did he throw his voice all the way to England and make an invisible force attack his family and visitors? Fact number 10. The spirit did eventually leave in 1821, but before it did, it promised that it was going to return in 7 years. Now, right on time, it did return to the home of Lucy Bell and her husband and her children. Lucy, however, said that because they ignored its presence, it did eventually disappear. Or did it? The Bell family spread out and moved across various states in the South, including Betsy Bell having moved to Mississippi. It is said that the spirit continued to torment the family, especially Betsy Bell, even though she was states away. Now, the spirit also once taunted the Bell family that it would return in the 1930s, and perhaps it still stalks the old plantation. You can visit the Bell plantation, but there are certain areas that are off limits to the public, including the Old Bell Cemetery. It could be in twofold: to prevent vandalism or to keep visitors safe. So those are 10 short, terrifying facts about the Bell Witch haunting. I hope that you enjoyed. And next time we will definitely have another topic similar. Let me know in the comments below what you would like to hear about. And as always, don't turn out the light.